I am David Clarke, or Clarky as I was known in Aylesbury, where I grew up as a teenager. I was born in Oldham, Lancashire in 1949, and my brother Michael was born in 1946, who sadly died of tuberculosis in New Bilibid Prison in May 2005. We have published various books that relate to our Christian experience and of our conversions from our lives of crime to Christ. I was called on the 16th of January 1970, but my brother 30 years later whilst in prison in the Philippines. I grew up with Michael in Aylesbury, Buckinghamshire during the 60s, and we became notorious criminals. We had no fear of God and had no regard to family or the wider society. We were sent to prison for malicious wounding and carrying a firearm without a licence in 1967. I spent time in Canterbury Prison before I was sent to Dover Borstal and Michael to 2 years in Maidstone Prison. On leaving Borstal in 1967, I had a 3-year career of undetected crime until I was arrested, but not by the police. I experienced a bad trip on LSD and called out to God for help, and Jesus spoke to me. My life was turned round that night, and I was converted from a life of crime to Christ and became a Christian. Michael, however, was left untouched and continued his life without reference to God, and ended up in prison in Asia's Far East some 25 years later. I then read and studied the Bible and a range of classical Christian books before joining the Beaton Strict and Protected Baptists in 1976. This was because they believed the doctrines of grace which are taught in the Gospels. I continued to study and graduated with a certificate in education awarded by Birmingham University in 1977. I was called by the Lord and sent to preach the gospel by Beaton Strict and Protected Baptist Church in 1982, and preached in many churches in the UK and later in the prisons of the Philippines. I taught electronics from 1978 to 2001, which is over 20 years, as a lecturer at Luton College of Higher Education and Fareham Colleges, after which I went on Christian mission work to the jails in the Philippines. This was prompted by the good news of my brother's conversion from crime to Christ after serving 5 years of his 16-year sentence in New Bilibid Prison, where he sadly died of tuberculosis in 2005. Our life stories and testimonies are told in our books, Converted on LSD Trip and Trojan Warriors, with a third edition of Converted on LSD Trip now named the Book of Clarky, specially prepared for prison inmates in the UK, as over 400 copies have been requested for prison inmates by chaplains from Belmarsh, Wandsworth, Manchester and Risley prisons. The foreword being written by Greg Haslam, Senior Minister of Westminster Chapel, London, which reads, David Clarke tells the story of his troubled, violent past and his extraordinary life in such a way that it tells the story of Jesus' love to him. Greg Haslam, Senior Minister of Westminster Chapel, London. Please contact us to order your copy of the book. Website www.beatonparticularbaptist.co.uk. David is available to preach the gospel wherever the Lord opens the door, in the UK or abroad, and to share the good work that God is doing in men's lives today.